I used to think snow was one of those problems you just lived with when you bought a house in the Midwest, like raccoons getting into your trash or hearing somebody's leaf blower at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Annoying, sure, but temporary. Then my neighbor, technically not even a neighbor, a giant chain grocery store called Fresh Barn Market sitting behind my property, decided my backyard was going to become their personal snow dump. And that's when things got real weird. It started with one pile, maybe 2 feet high, shoved against the back corner of my fence after a storm in December. I remember standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee watching the plow truck back up like a tank commander, slam the blade down, and push this dirty mountain of snow straight toward my shed. I figured maybe the driver was new. Maybe he didn't know where the property line ended. So I let it go, because normal people assume other adults know how boundaries work. Big mistake. A week later, another storm rolled through, and this time the pile came back bigger, heavier, packed with road salt, cigarette butts, crushed soda cups, and little chunks of black ice that looked like asphalt. When it melted, it burned these ugly yellow scars into my grass. My fence started groaning every time the plows hit it. You could literally hear the wood creak at night when temperatures dropped, like the whole thing was tired of getting bullied. By January, it wasn't an accident anymore. It became routine. Every snowfall, those plows cleared the entire Fresh Barn parking lot, then dumped the final pass directly against my fence like they were unloading garbage behind a prison wall. One morning, I found a busted taillight lens frozen inside the pile. Another time, there were grocery receipts and an entire coffee tray buried in the snowbank. Real classy operation back there. So I called the store manager. Guy named Dennis. Mid-50s, slicked back gray hair, always wore one of those quarter-zip sweaters managers think make them look important. I explained the situation calmly, neighbor-to-neighbor style, and this dude actually sighed into the phone like I was interrupting his golf game. He goes, "Well, the snow has to go somewhere." That sentence stayed in my head longer than it should have. Because people say stuff like that when they've convinced themselves your problem doesn't matter. And once somebody starts treating your property like it's disposable, they usually don't stop on their own. The next storm hit 3 days later. I watched the plow driver do it again in broad daylight, blades scraping pavement, snow rolling like a wave right into my fence line. This time the pressure bent one of the fence posts sideways. I walked outside while the truck was still idling and waved the guy down. He cracked the window maybe 2 inches and shrugged at me like he'd had this conversation before. "Store told us to push it here," he said. Then he drove off. That right there was the moment something changed in me. Not rage exactly, more like clarity. Because now I knew this wasn't negligence, it was policy. Fresh Barn knew exactly what they were doing. They just assumed nobody would push back. And honestly, they were probably used to getting away with it. Big companies count on regular homeowners being too busy, too broke, or too intimidated to fight them. So one night, I dug out the folder from my home closing documents. The boring stack of papers everybody throws into a drawer and forgets exists. Buried inside was an old survey map from when I bought the property. Folded, yellowed, coffee stain in one corner. I almost tossed it aside until I noticed something strange. According to the survey, my rear fence wasn't sitting on the actual property line. It was several feet inside it. At first I thought I was reading it wrong, so I grabbed a flashlight and walked outside in the snow like some lunatic detective in sweatpants at midnight, measuring distances from the shed to the tree line. And the more I checked, the less sense my fence placement made. That's when the whole situation stopped being about snow. Because if that survey was right, Fresh Barn hadn't just been dumping snow on my yard. They'd been using part of my land for years. Now here's the part nobody tells you when you buy a house. Property disputes almost never start with some dramatic movie-style confrontation. Most of them begin with tiny little compromises people ignore because they don't seem worth the stress. A fence gets moved a few feet, somebody parks a trailer temporarily, a business starts using a corner of land because it's easier that way. And over time, everybody forgets what was originally agreed to. According to standard procedure, that's exactly why surveys exist in the first place. They're basically the physical truth sitting underneath years of assumptions and laziness. And companies know most homeowners never double-check them after closing because honestly, who does? But from a legal perspective, there's a huge difference between tolerated use and permanent ownership. Fresh Barn was acting like because they'd used that section of land for years, it automatically became theirs. That's not always how it works. especially if permission existed at some point in the past. See, this is a psychological trap a lot of corporations fall into. The longer they get away with crossing boundaries, the more entitled they become. They stop seeing your patience as kindness and start seeing it as weakness. Dennis, the manager, had already revealed the mindset with that one sentence. The snow has to go somewhere. Translation: your inconvenience matters less than ours. And trust me, HOA boards pull this exact same move all the time. They bank on homeowners not understanding easements, setbacks, or property lines because legal confusion keeps people quiet. The lesson here is, the second somebody consistently benefits from ignoring your boundaries, you need documentation, not arguments. Feelings don't matter nearly as much as paper trails. And lucky for me, I was about to find a very expensive paper trail sitting underneath that parking lot. The next morning, I called a survey company out of Cedar Ridge, and let me tell you, paying $900 for a land survey feels insane right up until the moment it changes your entire life. Two guys showed up wearing neon jackets, carrying tripods and little orange flags like they were about to investigate a crime scene. Dennis happened to be outside smoking near the loading dock when they arrived, and I'll never forget the look on his face when he realized those surveyors weren't there for Fresh Barn. He kept pretending not to stare while they measured everything behind my shed, tapping markers into frozen ground, checking coordinates, muttering numbers back and forth. Couple hours later, one of them walks over holding a clipboard and goes, "Sir, your fence is not on your property line." My stomach dropped for half a second because I thought somehow I was the one in trouble. Then he pointed beyond the fence, directly into the grocery store parking lot. 5 feet past it. 5 whole feet. Doesn't sound like much until you realize commercial parking lots are engineered down to inches. Those 5 feet included 8 parking spaces, a shopping cart return, and part of the lane delivery trucks used to swing into the loading dock. I just stood there staring at Fresh Barn's asphalt sitting on land I'd technically been paying taxes on since I bought the house. Suddenly, every pile of snow, every smug shrug, every "it has to go somewhere" comment felt different. They hadn't been inconveniencing me by accident. They'd been operating like my property was already theirs. So I documented everything. Photos of the stakes, measurements, aerial maps, copies of the survey. Then I sent the entire packet certified mail to Fresh Barn corporate headquarters. I kept the message simple. Your property is encroaching onto mine. You have 30 days to address the issue before legal action begins. Real polite, real cold. 3 days later, I got a call from some corporate legal rep named Allison, who sounded like she billed people by the minute. She starts talking in that calm lawyer voice designed to make you feel dumb before the conversation even starts. "Mr. Carter," she says, "the current parking configuration has existed for over a decade." I said, "Okay." She pauses, probably expecting me to panic. Then she says they believe the space had become accepted use. That phrase right there, accepted use. Corporate language for, "we've been getting away with this long enough that we'd like to keep doing it." So I hired an attorney. Best decision I made the entire year. My lawyer, Ron Mercer, was one of those old-school property attorneys who looked permanently annoyed even while standing still. Guy had suspenders, coffee breath, and zero patience for corporate nonsense. He reviewed the survey, reviewed the property records, and then asked me a question that changed everything. Did the previous homeowner ever sign anything? Turns out, yeah. Buried deep inside the giant binder of home records was a single-page document from 12 years earlier. Temporary access permission during a repaving project. That's it. One sheet of paper. The previous owner had allowed Fresh Barn temporary use of that strip of land while they resurfaced the lot. But legally speaking, temporary permission destroys a lot of adverse possession arguments because it proves the use wasn't hostile or unauthorized at the beginning. Ron actually laughed when he read it. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "they just lost their leverage." And suddenly everything changed. Ron sent Fresh Barn a formal demand letter requiring removal of all encroachments or negotiation of a paid easement agreement plus retroactive usage compensation. Corporate responded fast after that. Real fast. First, they offered to buy the strip outright. The number was insulting. I won't even say it out loud because it still annoys me. Basically enough money to replace the fence and maybe buy a used fishing boat if the engine already had problems. I declined. Then they came back slightly higher. Still low. And here's the funny thing. Once people realize they can't bully you anymore, they start calling confidence unreasonable. Allison actually told my attorney I was being emotional. Emotional? Lady, your company has been parking shopping carts on my land while dumping chemically treated snow against my fence for months. But sure, I'm the emotional one. By early March, the snow finally melted, and the full damage showed itself. Grass completely dead behind the fence line. Soil burned white from salt. Fence posts cracked at the base from pressure. It looked like somebody had parked a tank behind my shed all winter. That was the moment I stopped negotiating passively. I hired a contractor and told him to move the fence to the surveyed boundary immediately. No delay, no warning. Just do it. According to standard procedure, once a surveyed property line is verified, a homeowner absolutely has the right to build a fence directly on that boundary as long as local zoning codes are followed. Fresh Barn apparently forgot that part. The crew showed up at 7 a.m. on a Thursday. By noon, the old fence was gone. By sunset, the new fence stood 5 feet farther back, clean, straight, perfectly aligned with every survey marker. And overnight, chaos. Pure chaos. 8 parking spaces disappeared instantly because cars could no longer open doors safely near the fence. The shopping cart corral ended up partially trapped outside their usable lane. Delivery trucks suddenly had to make awkward multi-point turns to reach the loading dock. I sat on my back porch drinking coffee the next morning watching a produce truck attempt a 17-point turn like it was trying to parallel park a cruise ship. Honestly, one of the best mornings of my life. Around 10 a.m. my phone exploded. Dennis. He sounded panicked now, voice tight, breathing hard. You can't just do this, he snapped. I remember actually laughing. Dennis, I said, I literally can. He starts rambling about operational disruptions, delivery complaints, safety hazards. Then he hits me with my favorite line of the whole situation. This is hurting the business. And I swear there was this beautiful little moment of silence before I answered. Kinda like what the snow was doing to my property. Dead quiet after that. Then he tried blaming the plow contractor. That part almost impressed me. The commitment to avoiding responsibility was Olympic level. I reminded him Fresh Barn hired the contractor. Fresh Barn directed the snow placement. Fresh Barn ignored the complaints. He didn't have much left to say after that. 2 days later, a regional manager named Rebecca called me, and immediately I could tell the tone had changed. Completely different energy. Calm, respectful, prepared. No intimidation tactics. No fake legal confidence. Because now the problem wasn't hidden behind my shed anymore. It was costing Fresh Barn money every single day. That's the thing about corporations. Morality rarely motivates them, inconvenience does. Rebecca apologized for the handling of the situation and asked to discuss mutual solutions. Corporate language for please stop wrecking our parking lot operations. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She brought actual repair estimates for my lawn before I even sat down. Smart move. She offered full fence replacement reimbursement, soil restoration treatment for the salt damage, protective snow barriers along the rear lot edge, and compensation for a long-term easement allowing Fresh Barn continued use of the disputed strip. This time the numbers were serious. We negotiated for about a week. Ron handled most of it, while I mostly sat there learning how expensive commercial parking spaces apparently are. We eventually settled on $45,000 for a 12-year easement agreement. Fresh Barn maintained access to the parking area and delivery lane, but ownership remained mine permanently. They rebuilt the fencing using heavier posts, restored the lawn, reseeded the damaged areas, treated the soil, installed permanent concrete snow stops behind the lot, and added new plowing restrictions into their contractor agreements. Funny how quickly solutions appear once liability enters the conversation. The final paperwork took another month, and when everything was signed, Rebecca actually admitted something during our last meeting. She told me multiple homeowners had complained about snow dumping over the years at other locations, but most people gave up before pushing legally. That stuck with me for a while. Because honestly, that's the whole game sometimes. Wear people down until they decide defending themselves costs too much energy. But this time they picked the wrong backyard. The next winter came early. First big storm hit in December. I remember standing at my kitchen window, watching the Fresh Barn plows clear the lot again. Same trucks. Same drivers. Except this time, when they reached the back edge near my property, they stopped clean at the concrete barriers and turned away. No snow crossed the fence. Not 1 inch. And man, There was something deeply satisfying about watching people finally respect a boundary they used to pretend didn't exist. Looking back now, the crazy part isn't even the money or the legal fight. It's how close I came to ignoring the whole thing completely. Seriously, if Dennis had just handled that first phone call like a decent human being, maybe apologized, maybe sent somebody out to move the snow, maybe replaced one damaged fence post, none of this would have happened. Fresh Barn would still have their quiet little extra parking strip nobody questioned for years. But arrogance does something weird to people. The longer somebody benefits from crossing a boundary, the more offended they become when you finally enforce it. And honestly, I think that's why this story hit such a nerve with people in my neighborhood after everything became public. Because it was never just about snow. It was about that feeling of being slowly pushed aside on your own property while somebody bigger keeps acting like your discomfort is just the cost of doing business. From a legal perspective, this situation could have gone very differently if I didn't have documentation. That old survey map and temporary access note saved me. Without paperwork, these disputes turn into exhausting, she said, battles that can drag on forever. According to standard procedure, homeowners should always keep copies of surveys, permits, easements, and any weird agreements tied to the property, even if they seem useless at the time. Trust me, the boring paperwork is usually the stuff that protects you when things get ugly. And psychologically, this is a perfect example of incremental disrespect. Small violations repeated over time become normalized. First it's snow, then it's parking, then suddenly somebody's operating a chunk of their business on land you legally own while acting annoyed that you noticed. This is a psychological trap because people naturally avoid confrontation, especially with corporations, HOAs, or anyone who appears more powerful financially. Most folks convince themselves staying quiet is easier. Sometimes it is, temporarily. But unresolved boundary violations almost always grow larger with time. The lesson here is, patience only works if it's paired with action eventually. Being calm doesn't mean being passive. You don't need to scream, threaten people, or play tough guy to defend yourself. Sometimes the strongest move is just quietly gathering evidence while the other side keeps underestimating you. And if I'm being honest, that final winter morning taught me something too. Watching those plows stop exactly at the barrier line felt bigger than property rights. It felt like proof that boundaries only matter when you're willing to enforce them. So now I'm curious, what would you have done in my position? Would you have taken the buyout immediately, fought for more, or moved the fence the second you discovered the survey? Let me know in the comments, because I guarantee half the people listening think I was patient, and the other half probably think I should have gone even further.